The night did not simply fall over the forest. It crashed down like a collapsing sky. Thunder rolled in jagged waves, shaking the ground beneath Leora's bare feet as she tore through the trees. Rain hammered against her skin, sharp and cold, each drop stinging like a slap. The storm felt alive, hunting her just as fiercely as the shadows behind her. She ran anyway, not because she believed she could outrun what followed, but because stopping meant facing what waited at the end of this night. Her breath broke in harsh, uneven gasps. Every inhale tasted like fear. Every exhale came out as a plea she would never speak aloud. Branches reached for her cloak like claws, ripping small lines across her arms, her legs, her throat. The forest seemed determined to slow her down, as if it understood the danger she carried inside her chest. And still she pushed forward, whispering the same two words over and over, a frantic chant swallowed by the storm. Too late. I'm too late. Her voice shook, not just from exhaustion, but from the terrible truth sitting heavy in her stomach. She knew the Alpha King would be waiting. She knew he would notice her absence. She knew he would ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. And she knew she would have to look into his eyes. The thought almost made her stumble more than the pain in her legs. Behind her, the shadows closed in. Not imagined ones, real ones. Wolves. Their growls rolled low through the trees, vibrating through the wet earth. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. She could feel them. Feel the hunger in their stride, the certainty in their movements, the raw instinct telling them she was prey. She had always been prey in someone's story. Tonight, she refused to be again, but refusing wasn't the same as winning. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs as a pulse of heat shot down her spine. The familiar burn, unwanted, unpredictable, flared beneath her skin. It crawled down her arms, across her stomach, into her hands. Silver light flickered under her flesh, like lightning trying to escape. Not now. Not here. But her power never listened. A sharp crack split the air. A tree limb crashed down inches behind her. She jumped out of its path, slipping in the mud, falling hard onto her knees. Pain jolted through her, but she pushed herself up, legs trembling, hair plastered to her face. Her wound, gods, she didn't even know when she'd gotten it, burned with every ragged heartbeat. Her palm pressed against her side, and her warmth, seeped through her fingers. She hissed in pain, but kept going. The storm made it impossible to see anything clearly, yet she recognized the faint outline rising ahead, the high, unforgiving gates of the Alpha King's stronghold. Their silver edges gleamed faintly, even in the darkness, cold, sharp, impossibly tall. Home. At least, that's what everyone called it. But for Liora, home was the place she feared most. Every step toward the gates felt heavier, as if the earth were trying to pull her back. The castle loomed like a giant carved from shadow, its towers piercing the storm clouds, its walls slick with rain, its torches guttering wildly in the wind. Lightning flashed, illuminating her for a heartbeat. She looked small, broken, carved out of exhaustion and secrets. Yet something inside her refused to collapse. That silver glow beneath her skin flickered again, brighter this time, like a warning. Or a promise. Or both. She didn't know. She never understood it. She only knew it grew stronger whenever she was close to the Alpha King. And tonight, she could feel him somewhere inside those walls, awake, restless, waiting. Waiting for her. And that truth terrified her more than the wolves behind her. Her knees buckled just as she reached the gates. She caught herself against the stone, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. The world swayed. Her hand slipped. She almost fell again, but the cold metal beneath her palm grounded her just enough to stay upright. She blinked rain out of her eyes, staring up at the towering entrance as another wave of heat rippled through her veins. Why now? Why tonight? Why, after weeks of silence and avoidance and pretending she felt nothing, did this power choose to rise just because she was coming home late? Because home was dangerous. Because the Alpha King was dangerous. Because feelings she never wanted to name had been growing inside her chest like roots she couldn't cut away. The wolves drew nearer. The growling deepened. Mud splashed behind her as heavy paws hit the ground. She pressed harder against the gates, chest heaving. "Open," she whispered, not to the guards, but to the power within her. "Please, just this once, don't make a scene." But the power didn't listen. It never had. She gasped as another burst of heat surged through her, brighter, hotter, more alive. For a moment she could almost see the silver flame under her skin, weaving through her veins like living lightning. She clenched her jaw, fighting it with everything she had. Not here. Not in front of the castle. Not where he could see. Because if the Alpha King saw this, saw what she was becoming, saw what she had been hiding, he would never let her go. Or worse, he would. A loud howl shattered the moment. She spun, stumbling backward, eyes wide. The wolves broke through the last line of trees, their silhouettes massive against the lightning-lit sky. Golden eyes locked on her. Muscles tensed. Teeth glinted. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. And then, the gates groaned. The metal shifted. A blinding burst of torchlight spilled onto the muddy ground. Liora froze, drenched, trembling, breathless. Because she knew long before she saw him that he was there. And she knew what he would feel when he saw her like this. Late. Wounded. Glowing with power she couldn't control. Jealousy. Fear. Possession. And something far darker, far more dangerous. The kind of emotion that made the Alpha King lose control. Tonight, the Maid returns late. Tonight, the Alpha King will burn. A beat. Thunder rolls. The forest holds its breath. If you love intense werewolf romance, subscribe to Moonlight Desires now, because what happens next, you don't want to miss. The gates hadn't finished opening when Leora's legs gave out. The world tilted, the storm warped into streaks of silver and black, and she collapsed onto the slick stone. Cold seeped through her skin, but it barely registered. Her heartbeat drowned everything else out, until it didn't. Because suddenly another heartbeat cut through the storm. Slow. Heavy. Unmistakable. Footsteps approached, unhurried and certain. Soldiers scattered out of the way without needing a command, moving like men who knew better than to stand between their king and the reason he hadn't slept. Liora forced her eyes open. A tall figure blocked the torchlight, standing over her like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Rain clung to his dark hair, ran down his jaw, soaked the black shirt stretched across his chest. His scent, cold night, steel, something raw beneath, cut through the storm and wrapped around her like a memory she'd buried too deep. Raelith. Alpha King. The man she avoided, and the man she kept dreaming about anyway. He didn't touch her at first. He just stared down at her, expression carved from shadows. His eyes glowed faintly, the storm reflected inside them as if it answered to him alone. Then he spoke, voice low and edged with something she couldn't name. "You're late." 2 words, but they hit with the force of a blow. Not angry, no, anger she could handle. This was something heavier. Something that vibrated under his skin like a beast pacing too close to the surface. She tried to answer and failed. Her throat worked soundlessly, breath catching as another tremor of heat rippled beneath her skin. His gaze flicked to the glow at her collarbone, and the muscles in his jaw tightened. He knelt before she could pull away. The storm faded around them. He slid an arm beneath her back, lifting her with effortless strength. Mud and rain smeared against him, but he didn't seem to care. His grip was firm, steady, almost gentle, though he'd never admit it. "You shouldn't be out there alone," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Not tonight. She didn't know how he knew where she'd been. She never told him. She never told anyone. But Raelith had always sensed things he shouldn't. Especially when it came to her. His hand brushed the edge of her torn cloak. The reaction was instant. A burst of heat shot through her, silver fire surging in response to the contact, as if her power recognized him long before she'd ever dared to. She gasped and tried to pull back, but his hold tightened, not in force, but in certainty. His eyes darkened. "You've been hiding it again." She turned her face away, unable to meet that stare. It wasn't judgment she feared, it was understanding. He saw too much. Always had. Raelith exhaled, the sound rough, controlled. "Liora." Just her name, but it carried something dangerous. Something that made her pulse jump despite the pain. "You think I don't feel it when you're in danger?" Lightning cracked above them, illuminating the courtyard in white. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Just the storm. Just his hands holding her together. Just the truth she wasn't ready to face. Fear twisted with relief. She shouldn't want to lean into him, but her body betrayed her, sagging against his chest. Confusion pressed hot in her ribs, tangled with a pull she'd spent months trying to silence. And Raelith Alpha King, the man who trusted no one, looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him sane. He rose to his feet with her in his arms, voice dropping to something rough enough to scar. "Next time you run from me." His grip tightened just enough for her to feel his pulse against her skin. "Don't expect me to let you go so easily." The storm swallowed the rest, but the promise lingered. Sharp. Heavy. Undeniably real. And for the first time that night, the wolves behind her weren't the danger she feared most. He was. Raelith carried her through the courtyard as if the storm had no authority here. Soldiers stepped aside without a word, their faces tightening when her silver glow pulsed faintly against the darkness. None dared comment. None dared look too long. But Raelith, he didn't look away for a single heartbeat. He crossed the threshold into the castle hall, the heavy doors slamming behind them with a finality that made her pulse jump. The storm's roar dulled instantly, replaced by the distant echo of dripping rain and the soft thud of his boots on stone. The heat from his body contrasted sharply with the cold she dragged in from outside. And with that warmth came the memories. They rose without permission, uncoiling in the back of her mind like shadows lit by silver fire. She saw herself at 8 years old, small, trembling, surrounded by pups from her old pack. Their faces twisted with fear as the brightness beneath her skin flared. One girl screamed. Another pointed at her like she was something warped, something unclean. Silver curse, they had chanted. A childish taunt then. A lifelong truth afterward. The vision shifted. She was older now, 13, standing in the training yard. Someone lay on the ground, her friend, the only one who'd ever defended her, and his arm was burned where her power had lashed out without warning. Her alpha's face had twisted with disgust as he dragged her away. Not out of concern. Out of shame. "You're dangerous," he'd told her. "No pack can trust a creature that burns its own." The memory snapped like a thread pulled too tight. Liora flinched in Raelith's arms. He felt it, of course he did, but he didn't press her or demand answers. He just adjusted his hold, fingers pressing lightly against her back, grounding her in a way she wished she didn't need. He ascended the staircase, climbing deeper into the castle. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting light across his face, the shadows sharpening his jaw, the glow warming the darkness in his eyes. There was something unsettlingly calm about him here, as if the storm outside only existed because he allowed it. Another memory gripped her. Her first day in this castle. A maid's apron tied too tightly around her waist, head bowed, hands shaking. She'd been certain they would sense the power she tried so hard to smother. Certain she'd be thrown out before she finished sweeping the floor. But Raelith had walked past her, paused, and turned. Not to accuse. Not to question. Just to look. As if he recognized something she had spent years trying to bury. He never forced her shift. Never demanded explanations. Never treated her like something broken or dangerous. Instead, he watched her with an awareness she didn't understand, an alpha who read her silence like it mattered. And that was the problem. Being unseen had been her safety. Being invisible had been her survival. But Raelith saw everything she tried to hide. Now, in his arms, the truth pressed painfully against her ribs. She didn't belong in this castle. She didn't belong near a king. She didn't belong anywhere that demanded trust or strength or a stable heartbeat. Yet here he was, carrying her through halls she had only ever walked with her head down, carrying her like she wasn't a burden, like he had every right to. The thought unraveled her. In her chest, a whisper rose, raw and fragile. "I don't belong here, but why does he make it feel like I do?" He reached his private chamber, the door swinging open without him slowing. The fire inside flickered warmly, lighting the room with a soft gold that wrapped gently around her shivering form. He set her down on the edge of the bed, his hands lingering at her waist an instant longer than necessary. She didn't look up. She couldn't. Because if she met his eyes now, she knew exactly what she'd see. Not fear. Not disgust. But recognition. And that was far more dangerous than the storm outside. Raelith didn't give her time to steady her breath. The moment her trembling slowed, he turned toward a carved stone panel at the far wall. His hand pressed into the pattern, an ancient crest she had dusted 100 times but never questioned, and the stones split apart with a grinding sigh. Cold air spilled through the widening passage, smelling of old magic and lunar frost. "Come," he said, but the word was more command than invitation. Liora followed because her legs moved on instinct, not certainty. The corridor beyond descended steeply, torches flickering to life as if awakened by their presence. The air grew dense, humming with a pulse she felt in her bones long before she understood it. At the bottom waited a chamber she had never seen, though every maid whispered of it in fearful fragments, a forbidden hall carved beneath the castle's spine. Moon crystals jutted from the ceiling and walls, glowing with a ghostly silver that soaked into her skin the moment she stepped inside. The symbols etched into the floor ignited. One after another, ancient lines burned awake, circling her feet with light so bright she staggered back. But the glow followed her, reaching like it recognized her shape, her heartbeat, her breath. She whispered, "Why is it doing that?" Raelith didn't answer. He watched her like she was a truth he had carried for years and was only now seeing with his own eyes. Awe carved into the hard lines of his face, softening nothing yet revealing everything. From the shadows, an elder emerged thin, wide-eyed, robes trailing like drifting ash. His voice was barely more than breath, but the chamber carried it as if it were a decree. "The child of the flame has returned." Liora froze. Her pulse stuttered. Her mouth went dry. She wanted to laugh or scream or run, but the elder knelt. He knelt to her. The sight shattered whatever denial she'd been clinging to. And still, she shook her head. "No, I'm no one. I'm just—" The visions hit mid-word. A flash of silver fire swallowing an entire battlefield. Wolves dropping to their knees, for bristling under the force of her power. A crowned figure standing at her side, illuminated by her light, Raelith or a future version of him, gaze fierce with loyalty, or burned away by the very power she could not control. A throne splitting in half. The sky bleeding silver. Her own voice screaming for everything to stop. And nothing listening. She stumbled as the vision snapped back into darkness. The chamber's light dimmed, waiting for her next breath like it depended on her choice. "This can't be me," she gasped, the words cracking against the cold. Raelith stepped closer, his presence filling the space with heat and certainty. He lifted her chin, not forcefully, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had already accepted the truth she feared most. "It has always been you," he said. And the way the crystals brightened at his words made her realize the chamber agreed. The prophecy wasn't awakening. It was remembering her. The chamber's light had barely dimmed when the world demanded her again. Hours later, summoned by a bell that echoed through every stone corridor, Liora found herself back in servant's garb, hands unsteady from visions she still couldn't breathe around. The royal assembly waited. The kingdom waited. And she, still shaking from prophecy, was expected to carry trays like nothing inside her had changed. She moved quickly, but not quickly enough. The moment she stepped into the great hall, a guard reached for her elbow to guide her through the crowded room. His touch was steady, practical, nothing more. But Raelith's gaze snapped to the contact with a fury that silenced half the assembly. His jaw tightened. His hands curled against the throne's arms. A low growl rippled under his breath, quiet, but not quiet enough. Whispers surged like a tide. "Why does the king look at her like that? She's late again. He only reacts when it's her. A maid. What spell does she hold over him?" Liora lowered her head and pulled away from the guard, but the damage was already done. Raelith's eyes held a jealousy so hot it singed the air between them, though he masked it behind the cold authority of a king addressing his court. The rival alpha from the northern clans stepped forward, seizing the moment. A thick-shouldered wolf with a voice like breaking stone pointed directly at her, his eyes sharp with accusation. That girl trespassed the sacred halls. I smelled old magic on her. Power she shouldn't possess. Another leader rose. The silver curse. It lingers around her. What else is she hiding? Leora's spine locked. Every instinct begged her to shrink, to vanish, to be no one, but Raelith's voice cut through the hall before she could move. She is under my protection. A simple sentence. Yet it crashed through the space like thunder. His court froze. Even the elders stiffened. Protection was one thing. Claim was another. And the line between them had just blurred in front of every watching eye. But he couldn't say the truth, not the prophecy, not the chamber, not the way the moon crystals had lit for her alone. So his silence bred suspicion, and suspicion became threat. The torches flickered. A draft curled across the hall, cold and wrong. Then shadows bled through the cracks in the stone, dark forms sliding into shape with growls that didn't belong to any clan. The assembly erupted into panic as monstrous beasts leapt from the darkness, eyes glowing with corrupted rage. Soldiers lunged forward. Wolves shifted midair. Raelith's roar shook the banners. And Liora, without thinking, reached for a fallen soldier, pulling him back before a beast could rip into him. Her hands touched his armor. Her power flared. Silver fire flashed under her skin, bursting uncontrolled. Gasps tore through the hall as the light illuminated every corner, every secret, every fear. Even the beasts recoiled. And the stunned silence that followed cut deeper than any blade. One elder stepped forward, voice trembling with judgment. Leave, Maid, before you doom us all. Liora didn't wait to hear anything else. She fled the hall before the echo of the elder's words finished sinking into stone. Cold air hit her lungs as she burst outside, running past the gates, past the torches, past anything that still felt like judgment. She didn't stop until she reached the moonlit hill that overlooked the kingdom, a quiet rise where the world finally allowed her to breathe. Her hands shook. Her pulse stuttered. The silver light under her skin flickered in small, traitorous glows, responding to every emotion she tried to bury. She covered her face, wishing she could hide the parts of her that terrified everyone, including herself. The crunch of footsteps behind her made her heart jump. But she didn't need to turn to know who it was. Raelith's presence rolled over the hill like a shadow that knew her name. He didn't roar. He didn't demand she return. He simply stopped a few steps behind her, his breath uneven, as though the battle inside the hall hadn't winded him, but seeing her run had. Liora, he said softly. She closed her eyes, hoping the tremor in her voice wouldn't betray her. I didn't mean to. I know. Silence settled, not heavy, but fragile. She turned slowly, expecting anger, expecting disappointment. Instead, she found something worse, worry carved into the hard lines of a king who rarely showed weakness. He approached her with measured steps, each one careful, deliberate, as though she might vanish if he moved too fast. When he stood close enough for moonlight to touch both their faces, he exhaled a truth she didn't expect. There was someone before, he said. A woman I trusted. A maid I believed the moon had chosen for me. Leora's breath hitched. Raelith never spoke of his past. Not to his generals. Not to his council. Not to anyone. She betrayed our bond, he continued quietly. She wanted my crown, not me. And when she realized I wouldn't give her what she sought, she tried to destroy what mattered most to me. My people. His jaw clenched. I swore I would never let anyone close again. Liora swallowed hard. Then why? Because you never asked for anything, he cut in, voice rough, edges unguarded. Not power. Not recognition. Not a place beside me. You tried so hard to be invisible that you didn't see how much I saw. He stepped closer. The night tightened around them, breathless. She shook her head, voice barely a whisper. I'm terrified of hurting anyone I love. Raelith's answer was immediate, almost desperate. You think you frighten me? His hand hovered near her cheek, not touching, but close enough to warm her skin. What frightens me is losing you. The distance between them collapsed into a single, trembling heartbeat. They stood inches apart, the kind of closeness that stole logic, leaving only truth. Why me? She whispered, voice shaking. His gaze softened, fierce and vulnerable all at once. Because when I look at you, he murmured, I see everything I lost, and everything I want to protect. They returned to the castle before dawn, both changed in ways neither dared to name. The moment Raelith led Liora through the great doors, a wall of tense silence greeted them. Council members gathered, torches flaring like angry eyes. The air crackled with accusation before a single word was spoken. At the center of the chamber, an elder stepped forward, holding a scroll sealed in blood wax. His stare fixed on Liora with grim satisfaction, as though he had been waiting for this exact moment. There is something the kingdom must hear, he announced, tearing the seal. Liora's stomach twisted. Raelith stiffened beside her. The elder lifted the scroll and read aloud, voice echoing off stone walls. Liora of the Silver Flame, exiled daughter of the fallen Ember Pack, marked by prophecy, born with fire that destroys kings. A shocked murmur swept the chamber. Liora felt her breath falter, her past dragged into the light like a weapon. That title was stripped, she whispered, but the elder spoke over her. She is the Flame-born, he hissed. The one foretold to bring ruin. The king's ruin. Another counselor rose abruptly. This is the girl you hide beneath your roof? A walking omen? A threat to the throne. His voice sliced through the hall. Her fire will burn the Alpha King. She is the beginning of the end. Torches guttered violently as though agreeing. Liora took a step back. The chamber felt smaller with every exhale. The pack those she served, healed, fed, stared at her like she had been wearing a mask made of lies. She waited for Raelith's voice. For his defense. For anything. But the king who stood inches from her on the moonlit hill now stood silent. Hesitating. Torn between crown and heart. The pause was brief, but long enough to break something fragile inside her. The council saw his silence and pounced. She deceived you, one snarled. She infiltrated the royal grounds. She carries powers she cannot control. She will destroy us. Seize her, the elder commanded. Soldiers moved instantly, armor clashing like thunder. Raelith reached out, too late, too conflicted, and that single moment of uncertainty shredded whatever safety Liora thought she'd found in him. A hand grabbed her arm. Something inside her snapped. Not in rage. In grief. Silver fire burst from her skin in a blinding spiral, hurling soldiers backward. The flames didn't burn flesh, they burned fear into the stone itself, carving glowing cracks along the floor. The entire chamber recoiled. Her breath trembled. Tears blurred her sight. She hadn't meant to unleash it. She never meant to confirm their worst fears. Raelith stepped toward her, voice low. Liora. She flinched away from him, hurt slicing deeper than any wound. You hesitated, she whispered. His expression shattered, but she couldn't bear to look. If you believed in me, she murmured, you would have spoken first. The flames flared again, wild, sorrowful, desperate. Before anyone could recover, she turned and fled the hall, silver fire trailing behind her like the ghost of a heartbreaking. And in her final glance back, she saw Raelith reaching for her. But the crown holding him still. Night had barely settled when the blood moon climbed the sky, an omen the kingdom should have feared long before now. Beyond the castle walls, past the ancient trees twisted by old magic, the ritual grounds pulsed with a violent, unnatural glow. Liora stumbled into the clearing, breath shaking, her heart a raw wound. She wanted distance. Silence. Anything to drown out Raelith's hesitation echoing through her chest. But the world did not grant her solitude. The moment her foot crossed the stone ring, the shadows stirred. A shape peeled itself from the darkness, tall, skeletal, wolf-like but wrong in every way. A Shadowwalker Alpha. one of the cursed lineage that fed on dying wolf magic. His voice slithered around her like cold smoke. Flameborn, he rasped. You ran from your king, but you cannot run from me. Liora backed away, pulse pounding, but before she could speak, the ground trembled. From the forest behind him, wolves were dragged forward, bound, beaten, bleeding. Raelith's soldiers. The kingdom's young. Their cries cut the air like splintered bone. And then Raelith himself crashed into the clearing mid-shift, matted with blood. He lunged at the Shadow Walker, but the creature's darkness coiled around him like living chains, slamming him to the earth. Liora froze in horror. The Alpha King who ruled storms, pinned like prey. The Shadow Walker bent toward Raelith's throat. Give her to me, he hissed. Her power. Her birthright. Her fire. Or watch your kingdom die. Raelith struggled, teeth bared, fury hunting through his veins. But even he could not break the shadow bind. Something inside Liora hardened. Not fear. Not guilt. Something older. The silver light beneath her skin woke with a slow, deliberate rise, like dawn bleeding through her bones. Her fingertips glowed first. Then her arms. Then her entire body shimmered with living flame. But this time, it didn't crack or lash or burn uncontrollably. It obeyed. She stepped forward, and the flames parted around her feet like reverent tides. The earth trembled with every stride. Even the shadows recoiled. Raelith's eyes widened, not in fear, but in something close to awe. Liora's voice carried with an ancient echo. Let them go. The Shadow Walker snarled. You cannot command me, child. But the ancestors whispered through her, threading power into every breath. Burn. Rise. Become. Her silver fire erupted not outward, but upward, spiraling into the sky like a column of living light. It crashed down around the ritual site, forming a circle of blazing runes that trapped the Shadow Walker in place. He roared, sinking to one knee, shadows writhing under the force of her power. Liora lifted her hand, and the darkness bent. For centuries, she said, you fed on fear. On weakness. On wolves who had no chance to stand against you. Her flame surged, tightening its hold. I am not one of them. The Shadow Walker screamed as the fire forced him fully to the ground. But as he fell, his laughter slashed through the clearing. You think you are the only one? He rasped, shadows pooling beneath him like spreading ink. Little flame, you are not alone. Another like you has already risen. The ground split with a violent crack. And from the darkness beneath, a second ember glow stared back at her. The ritual ground fell silent, so silent it felt like the entire forest held its breath. Liora's flames flickered, struggling against a cold that wasn't natural. The crack in the earth widened, groaning like some ancient wound torn open. From its depths, a second glow climbed upward, deeper, redder, more violent than her own silver light. When the figure emerged, the wolves gasped. It was human-shaped, but only barely. Flame-born like her, but twisted by something older than prophecy. Its eyes burned ember-red, the color of worlds ending. And as it stared up at Liora, it smiled, not with welcome, but with recognition. Liora stepped back instinctively. Every instinct screamed danger, betrayal, blood. Yet her heart throbbed with something more complicated, the feeling of being truly seen, but not in the way she ever wished for. The Shadow Walker Alpha, weakened but grinning through the dirt, rasped. You thought you were the chosen one. Foolish girl. You were only the first spark. But the new Flameborn ignored him. Its gaze remained locked on her, glowing with an unsettling calm. The wolves around the perimeter, injured, trembling, stared at Liora with wide, fractured eyes. Was she like the creature rising from the earth? Was she destined to become this? The question hung in their fear-soaked breaths. Raelith dragged himself upright, chains of shadow dissolving as the Shadow Walker's hold weakened. Wounded, shaking, he reached for her not with command, but with desperate, unspoken plea. Liora, he whispered. Stay with me. But the world around them had already shifted. No king's voice could steady it now. The new Flameborn tilted its head, studying her silver aura. Flames rippled along its arms in jagged, violent patterns, uncontrolled, hungry. When it spoke, its voice was distorted, layered with the echo of a dozen forgotten spirits. "Sister," it said. The word cracked through her bones. Leora's fire sputtered. The silver glow dimmed at the edges. She didn't know this creature. She didn't recognize its burning gaze. And yet the bond, thin, ancient, undeniable, quivered like a thread drawn too tight. The wolves retreated, ears flat, unsure whether to bow or run. Raelith's expression twisted, torn between fear for his people and fear of losing her all over again. The earth smoked. The moon bled red. Everything felt like it was teetering between birth and destruction. And Liora, standing amid scorched ground and shadows, felt more alone than she had ever felt in her exile. The creature's ember eyes narrowed. "Will you rise with me, or stand in my way?" Liora didn't answer. She couldn't. The world waited, pack, king, ancestors, prophecy, every gaze bearing down on her fragile, burning truth. And so the narrator's voice softens, drifting over the ruined clearing like wind through ash. "Tell me, would you have feared her or followed her?" Another breath. Another beat of smoky silence. Is she the kingdom's salvation, or its spark of ruin? The flames dim. The scene freezes on her trembling silhouette. And then the whisper becomes a flame-kissed promise. If this story set your heart on fire, subscribe to Moonlight Desires, where every tale burns brighter than the last. The battlefield was quiet now, but the silence was not peace. Smoke curled like thin fingers across the scorched earth, carrying the sharp scent of iron, ash, and silver fire. Liora stepped forward carefully, each footfall echoing against broken stone and shattered wood. Her silver aura dimmed but did not vanish, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a creature the world had yet to understand. The blood moon bled through scattered clouds, painting everything in an ominous red. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting over broken banners, toppled altars, and scattered remnants of wolf and man alike. The wind whispered through charred trees, a chorus of voices she could almost, but not quite, understand. Raelith's voice broke the heavy quiet. "Liora." It carried over the battlefield, sharp with worry and rage. He stepped from the ruins, dark silhouette against dying flames. His claws scraped the stone as he advanced, the air around him humming with raw power. But she did not turn. Not even to glance back. Not even for him. Her heart throbbed with every ounce of grief, fury, and betrayal she had carried from the council, through the forest, to the ritual site. Every memory, the taunts, the exiles, the hesitation, wove itself into a single, silent decision. The ground beneath them shivered. A low tremor rolled through the cracked stone, subtle at first, then deep and resonant, shaking dust from ruined walls and toppling loose shards. Liora froze, senses sharpened by instinct and fire. From the shadows, a voice slid through the night air, low, smooth, and impossible to locate. "She is not the only one born of fire," it whispered. Her body stiffened. Every hair on her arms rose. She felt it before she saw it, a presence vast, older, more dangerous than any Shadow Walker or rival Alpha. A pair of glowing silver eyes appeared from the darkness, illuminating nothing but threat. They burned with recognition, curiosity, and something far colder, judgment. Raelith's roar cut through the night as he stepped closer, claws extended, teeth bared. "Show yourself." His voice cracked, but even he hesitated, aware that whatever lurked in the dark was beyond any challenge he had faced. The eyes blinked slowly, deliberately, never revealing shape, never revealing intention. They held the weight of centuries, the certainty of prophecy, and the promise that Leora's journey was only just beginning. The earth trembled again. Smoke twisted upward, forming spectral shapes that danced around her, calling to the silver flame within. Leora's chest heaved, a mix of anticipation, fear, and determination. She had claimed her power tonight, but the world had shown her it was not hers alone. The voice whispered again, barely audible above the moan of the wind. You are not the first. You will not be the last. Leora's gaze never wavered. Her hand twitched slightly, silver sparks flickering at her fingertips, ready for what was coming, yet aware that this revelation was only the beginning. Raelith's voice softened now, almost pleading, Liora. She didn't answer. She walked away from the battlefield, from the blood, from the ruins of what had been the night's war. Her silhouette disappeared into the shadows, leaving the battlefield empty, quiet, waiting. And in the darkness, the glowing eyes followed. Watching, waiting, judging. The moon bled behind clouds, and the screen fades to black. This story is far from over.